Do you wonder where your food comes from? More and more people do. America's corn farmers work hard every day to grow a crop that you can be proud to serve your family. And they're doing it with an eye toward sustainability, caring for water, air, soil, and resources that fuel healthy families and more sustainable products. Take a look to find out how farmers in rural America work to make life better for all of us, from cities to their rural communities. Learn more at ncga.com. NCGA, a commitment to the future.
Streaming only on Peacock.
What do you know about Dr. Dunch?
He was charming, intelligent.
My patients mean everything to me.
Based on the unbelievable true story.
I can't make sense of it.
Dunch has 2 deaths that we know of. The state of Texas has executed people for less.
It's like he knew what he was supposed to do, and he did the exact opposite.
Dr. Death, starring Joshua Jackson with Christian Slater and Alec Baldwin.
I am going to fix you.
All episodes streaming now, only on Peacock.
This is Cougar Sports with Ben Criddle on ESPN 960 and 94.5 FM. And it's time for the Cougar Beat. Getting the dish from the local reporters that cover BYU sports here on your Cougar Sports Insider Radio Network.
Welcome back, Cougar Sports, ESPN 960. This is Cougar Country. I'm Ben Criddle, broadcasting live from our Wasatch Medical Clinic, WasatchMedicalClinic.com studios. Stop living with ED, live without it today at Wasatch Medical Clinic, WasatchMedicalClinic.com. It is time for a Cougar Beat, getting to know the vantage point, the perspective of those that cover the Cougar football team every single day. It's always brought to you by Built Bar, Built.com. Use that Criddle coupon code to get a delicious, nutritious protein bar, the best in Utah, the best in the country. That's right. It's based here in Utah County, by the way, Built Bar is. And they support BYU athletics. They are built, not born, right? They've built up a fantastic brand, and you can support them today at Built Bar, Built.com. Use that Criddle coupon code Criddle10, Criddle10, Criddle10 for 10% off your variety pack today. Let's talk conference realignment, conference expansion, possibly, maybe, and where BYU fans currently stand in this mix with the one, the only Cougar Sports Insider representing KSLSports.com, Mitchell LeVar, Big Baller Harper. Mitchell, how you living, man? Conference expansion talk, conference realignment. You eat this stuff up.
Oh, I love it. I love conference expansion conversation because, as we know with college sports, sometimes the narrative is probably bigger than the actual game itself, and nothing epitomizes that more than conference realignment. So, yeah, inject this into the veins. I love me some realignment.
Yes, indeed. When you heard that Texas and Oklahoma have been flirting, and not only flirting, they've been talking for over a year now, it seems, about leaving the Big 12, not renewing their grant of rights TV deal with the Big 12, and moving on to greener pastures. What was your initial thought?
I was shocked, first off, that it was going to be the SEC. That, to me, was probably the most shocking piece because, honestly, I don't think Texas really aligns at all with SEC when it comes to, small town living. All there is to life is simply their college football team. Like Texas is kind of a liberal town in Austin. It's becoming more blue in terms of politics. It just didn't really align with the SEC to me. I always feel like Texas was more of a Pac-12 type of brand, but the money that's going to be potentially there for a 16-team SEC that features Oklahoma and Texas will likely be massive, and that to me was just a huge moment that's going to have this ripple effect in college athletics, the likes of which we never before seen. And it was honestly, for once, my thought too was finally we're seeing a big-time realignment move. Like we've heard all these fantasies and theories about, this team could go here. I thought Nebraska back in the days of the Big Ten was massive, and Darnell knows a lot about that, but really, any other moves, they haven't been that big. This is actually a big-time move, and there's still some things that obviously got to happen, but all indications point that it will. And it was like, yes, finally we got a move that will actually have some tangible ripple effects in college athletics, and I'm here for it.
So tell me what you think about BYU's position in all this. 9 or 10 years ago, there was conference realignment talk. The Big 12 came flirting, didn't happen. In what ways do you think BYU is in a better position this time around that maybe they can make a move to put themselves in a conference and get access like they want?
Well, I think one of the big things, Darnell, is that, It's funny to me, the ripple effects that we're seeing with already Oklahoma and Texas withdrawing from their grant. They're not going to renew their grant of rights deal as they announced today. You've seen all these statements from the likes of Baylor and Oklahoma State, and it's basically just these high-strung emotions, just like, how could Texas and Oklahoma do this to us? And I'm thinking to myself, haven't we been told a narrative for all these years that these programs are the power brokers in college athletics? And lowly BYU, they're not powerful. They don't have any room to stand on anything. Yet throughout this decade, BYU has been on their own dime, doing their own thing. They're the only true independent left in college football. Don't tell me Notre Dame is independent. They have 4 to 6 games every year with the ACC, yet somehow, some way, BYU still finds a way to have success. They are able to get great home-and-home matchups. They've been able to show that their national following is real, it's tangible, in a landscape where they're playing really for nothing every single year, yet the fan base is as passionate as ever. Like, that to me is something that's been pretty significant for independence. You think about like what it was 10 years ago, and it feels like it's ancient history now compared to what the landscape of college athletics is today. But BYU has done a fantastic job with independence. I think it's gone better than anyone would give it credit for. Now, I think, though, if the Big 12 came calling, even in this current iteration, potentially, if they all band together with 8 teams, BYU would have to take that because I think there's more money involved potentially. And I think that BYU is a great product that could enhance the Big 12's ESPN Plus now digital streaming network. Because that's the thing that's going to be huge in this, is that I've seen BYU fans sign up to pay $40 to watch them play lowly UMass. You mean to tell me they won't pay $5 a month to watch BYU play at potentially the highest levels of college athletics? Yes, they're going to sign up for that. And that's the thing, too, guys, and you know this as well as anyone, this fan base, BYU fans, they will be as passionate as they've ever been. Been so passionate for years playing against just the WAC, the Mountain West, life into this fan base when they are told you are now in a power league. And it sounds like as of right now, the Big 12 with their current 8 members would still maintain their autonomous status, which is massive. And I think that's why those teams should band together and stay the course and try to get creative, add a BYU, try to go get a Colorado potential, because everything's on the table right now. Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC. Everything should be on the table. They got to have vision. They got to have leadership. I think BYU's got those people in place. Hopefully the Big 12 does too, to realize that BYU is, they're not Texas and Oklahoma, but dang, they can be pretty valuable as well.
Yeah, it's you want to be optimistic in these times. You want to be optimistic because there are advocates from a media standpoint that will say BYU is one of the brands that the Big 12 should look towards, right? Notre Dame, Paul Feinbaum mentions Notre Dame, BYU. Pete Thamel mentions SMU, Houston, BYU, Colorado State. I'm like, okay, like I don't necessarily, I'm not saying that those schools add anywhere near the value that Texas, Oklahoma add, but you have to wonder too, like where does the Pac-12, how do they view this, right? And do they try to pick off, 4 teams and try to increase their footprint in the college football world, just picking off the remnants of the Big 12? If you're the Pac-12, how do you view this? And what are the 4 schools that you would like to pick up from the Big 12 and or BYU?
I think the Pac-12 is definitely interesting in all of this. And I think their first piece that they need to take care of, this new commissioner, it seems like there's a strong relationship already forming between USC's AD and their school president with this new commissioner, George Kavilkoff. I hope I'm saying that right. They got to make sure USC is happy, because I think USC is the type of program, they're one of maybe, 3 or 4 brands that could take an independent route like a Notre Dame, where they could have all their sports still in a power conference and be able to carve out their own TV deal and have a national schedule that still puts them in the playoffs. But I think USC, they got to make sure to make them happy, because again, I think, if you're the Big Ten, you look at this news and you go, they're the second most powerful brand behind the SEC, the Big Ten is. And if you really want to go to 16 teams or maybe 18, 20 teams and form basically a semi-pro type of deal in terms of a TV product that compares to NFL-type money, you would look at like USC and UCLA types to come into your league and get creative in that sense. So the Pac-10, the Pac-12 has got to make sure that USC is completely on board with anything that they do. But I think, I just don't look at the Big 12 teams remaining that makes sense to me with the Pac-12. Because I think that the Pac-12, they still kind of cling to some of the old guard type of logic of the academics and everything. We know that's what ultimately moves the needle. These university presidents make the decisions. If BYU was in a realignment landscape that was decided by head coaches and athletic directors, BYU's in a Power 5 conference already, because you're talking about one of the winningest programs in the last 50 years of college football. BYU is well respected amongst ADs. They're not respected amongst university presidents. And university presidents in the Pac-12, I struggle to picture them aligning with Baylor, with Kansas, who's been rocked by scandal recently, both basketball and with their football program hiring Les Miles. I struggle to picture that working, and Oklahoma State conforming to the politics of the Pac-12, where that was a league that was frightened to play football last year. They waited till the bitter end to actually line it up and play. Big 12 last year, they lined it up, in September and played pretty much 10, 11 games, all their teams. The Pac-12 had, some 3 or 4 game seasons for some of their teams. So I just struggle to picture that working. I mean, I think those teams, if they can get the assurances they're going to get all this windfall of money, yeah, they'll probably lock in and go to the Pac-10 or Pac-12. But to me, I just feel like the Pac-12 might be a little more patient. Even though commissioner said they won't go poach these conferences. I struggle to believe that, but if they come calling, he's probably got to listen. But I think that, the Pac-12 conference, it will be fascinating to see what they do, because a couple weeks ago, everyone would have told you that's the worst Power 5 league in the landscape. And suddenly, with Texas and Oklahoma, now the Big 12 is ready to dissolve. I don't think it's that set yet, because this was a move that caught completely everyone off guard. Everyone in the college landscape was caught off guard. Even Barry Alvarez, who's now in charge of Big 10 realignment, he was completely floored by this move. So you're talking about the power influential individuals in this sport were completely caught off by this. So they have to kind of recalibrate, get their ducks in a row, and kind of figure out a path, because everyone's been focused on name, image, likeness. They've been focused on coming to a regular, normal season out of the pandemic. They got to figure out what lay of the land they're going to go with going forward with this conference realignment. So I think anything as far as what team so-and-so would pick off might be a tick premature at this moment.
Well, you know me. They call me Criddle the Capitalist for a reason. And I love meritocracies, and I like competition. And I think you can make an argument that over the last 50 years, BYU has earned the right to have access. I think you can make that argument. Yeah. How many teams has BYU outperformed that are in the Big Boys Club over the last 50 years? I would say it's been, from a revenue standpoint, from a value standpoint, you make some strong arguments there with the wins, losses, and, you look at the collective body of work from the individual player to the collective team, and it's hard to undermine BYU's resume. Yet there will always be those that will fight tooth and nail to undermine BYU's brand, BYU's image, BYU's BYU as an entity, and that coming with that, sometimes they're fighting against the sponsoring institution of the Latter-day Saint faith. So I ask you this, Mitch. Will we begin to see, if there continues to be conversations, valid conversations, regarding BYU and as a possible expansion candidate for the Big 12 or Pac-12 or otherwise, let's say, will we see those vocal and ardent contrarians come out of the woodwork and fight against BYU once again if that happens?
It's an interesting question, Ben, because I do feel like, it could potentially happen. I mean, I believe that 2016, when LGBTQ plus, activist group came out with that letter, Athlete Ally, I believe, was the name of the organization. I think that sunk all momentum in 2016. Now, you could argue, was Big 12 actually legitimately interested in realignment? Who knows? But I think if they were kind of leaning at all towards possibly doing it, that momentum got sunk by those activist groups, and even Iowa State was jumping on board trying to sink any potential move of BYU to the Big 12 conference. I mean, it's possible. Everything now in our society gets infiltrated with politics. So there's a precedent there that you would imagine it would. I mean, even back in the day, there's stories back in the 90s, and I've been doing a research project of the history of BYU when it comes to realignment. And you look at the early 90s, the Pac-10, their organization, their commissioner pitched an idea to university president of a league that featured BYU, Texas A&M, Missouri, Air Force, and one other Southwestern Conference team at the time. And they shot it down because they believed that would be, politically a disaster. So there's always a history when it comes to BYU and, things beyond the field of play that keep them out. Because, again, the resume for BYU, they are a power-type program. They operate, they look and feel like a power conference athletic department. You're talking about one of the top 20 athletic departments. When this fan base, talks about realignment, they point to religious affiliation, faith-based entity being the reason why it causes that. And everyone on the outside looking in says, no, it's not it. No, like BYU, what is it? Like, what is keeping BYU out? Because they win on the field. They compete at a high level. They're also a willing partner, too. I think that's one of the things that's been good about BYU the past 10 years that's improved significantly is that I don't think you're going to see a narrative emerge where, like once upon a time when BYU was actually having conversations with the Big East Conference, they're, quote, a piece of work to deal with. I don't think you're going to have that conversation happen anymore because you look at last year, BYU, they were willing to play anyone. Hey, Coastal Carolina wants to play. BYU will do it on a moment's notice. They might not ever get a game again from Coastal Carolina in Provo, but they want to put their programs, whether it be football, basketball, and everything else in between, at the highest stages. And if BYU can get on the highest stages of the college athletics and also make quite a bit more money than they're currently making right now, BYU will be a great partner to work with. Yes, there might be some logistical scheduling headaches that you have to deal with BYU because, let's face it, the Big 12 will not bend over backwards for what the WCC does for BYU's Olympic sports. But if you can overcome that, BYU will be a great party to work with that can enhance some autonomous status because of the two programs that are leaving. BYU.
We may have lost Mitch. Mitch, if you can hear me, I can't hear you anymore.
Yes, I can hear you, Ben.
Okay, I lost you there for a second. You were kind of coming in and out, but I want to kind of give you just real quick because you were I don't know if you're on the move or whatever, but you kind of cut in and out, so I didn't get your final thought on that. Can you just reiterate that last sentence for me as it pertains to conference realignment at BYU?
I feel that what I was saying, I was saying that BYU, I think they've improved the last 10 years in terms of the narrative of they're easier to work with, I think, these days compared to maybe 10 years ago. Because there was a once report when they were talking with the Big East Conference that it emerged as BYU is, quote, a piece of work to deal with. I don't think that narrative's there anymore. I think BYU has shown the last 10 years they're willing to be a collaborative effort and be a partner that enhances a scheduling agreement or whatever it may be, a conference, whatever it will be. They want to work to put their programs on the highest stage. They're willing to do whatever it takes other than playing on Sunday. So if you can overcome the logistical scheduling nightmare that is BYU, and yes, it's probably a nightmare for any other conference not named WCC, BYU is a great partner to work with and will not impose their will on a, like, yes, once upon a time when they were in the WAC in the Mount West, they were the powerful voice that kind of bullied their way and got what they wanted mostly. And if they didn't, they were going to do their own thing, form a league, new league, or go to the independent route. But now it's a different landscape. And BYU, I think, has improved themselves from the PR standpoint. And hopefully that gets acknowledged this go around if the Big 12 does stand together, because I think BYU could add a lot of value to that league that really has nothing to stand on other than they've been granted power status because of the two programs that are now leaving to the SEC.
100%. The good old boys club will tumble under the pressure of capitalism and meritocracies. I love it. Mitchell, appreciate you joining us. Great content as always. We invite everyone to follow you on Twitter, Mitch_Harper. Always read your stuff at KSLSports.com and also download the podcast, the Cougar Trats Podcast. Thanks so much, Mitchell.
Thank you, Ben. Take care, guys.
Always a blessing having Mitchell on. Any commentary, Darnell?
One thing I want to mention is BYU over the last couple of years has done a lot of work to try to bring themselves to a point where maybe the LGBTQ community is not quite against them as much as they used to be. The good work of Senior Associate Athletic Director Liz Darger has been key to that. They also hired Whitney Johnson last year to work with diversity. So I think they're attempting. I mean, this obviously has a lot of repercussions throughout the university, but in terms of how it relates to sports, I think they're trying to put themselves in a position where if there are accusations, if there are those against them for certain reasons, they can point to, look what we've been doing with our own campus, with the LGBTQ community on our campus, with diversity, all those things. I think that's part of how BYU is perceived, maybe not as harsh as it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. So will it make a difference? Will there still be protests? Probably. But I don't think they have quite the leg to stand on as they did back then, because BYU has tried to make some inroads in those areas.
Once again, what's the rhetoric nationally regarding the LDS Church and BYU? Because even BYU as an entity is different than BYU, the athletic department. You're talking about athletic department moves, athletic department hires. You're talking about, I mean, even when Black Lives Matter, that movement occurred, BYU's athletic department, BYU's football program discussed via a social media post their thoughts, their feelings on it. That's separate from BYU as an entity. So you know what I mean? Like,
well, it is, but I don't think you can. I think people can still look at it as that's BYU as a whole. I think you can encompass all of it.
The most diverse entity within BYU is the athletic department. That's the greatest thing about sports. It's a melting pot of, as much as you can get at BYU, a melting pot of ethnicities and cultures, and that's what sports is so amazing to me. I love it because many individuals within the BYU and LDS Church, if they were born and raised in the United States of America, albeit, they may serve outside for 2 years, but they're not exposed to as much culture and diversity as you would want, right? I mean, but I think you can make an argument for that, serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but also the naysayers will rebuttal that all day and say, oh, that's your badge of diversity honor? Oh, you're going to go that route? I mean, it's
the groups,
you know what I mean? Like, so you need more qualitative and quantitative data to support that.
It's a start.
I know, but you're still dealing with hundreds of years of perception.
Sure. Yeah.
Guys, you're dealing with I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints recently has aligned with the NAACP and consulted and offered services and resources in a number of ways, right? And the NAACP has, in turn, discussed it vocally and openly to the media about the positive impact that the LDS faith has had on the inner city Black community and African American communities that are in need of these services that they've provided. And much of it is like, from what I need to study up on it even more. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm an expert on this by any means, but a lot of it is sitting down with leaders of those Black communities and discussing, education. It's discussing, hey, we'll offer you free litigation and law services for setting up LLCs and representation, right? Maybe wrongfully accused. I mean, there's a number of things, right, that and resources that maybe some of these communities don't have. And so the LDS faith has come in and LDS Church has come in and said, you're going to have to do it more. You're going to have to do it more. It's more and more and more and more. Until the rhetoric is destroyed that the LDS faith is racist and that BYU is racist, or that you're I don't know how to bridge the gap between the LDS faith and the proclamation to the family and nuclear families, how you're able to build bridges and build that bridge between BYU LDS faith and the LGBTQ community. I don't know. That's not for me to execute. I want to believe that you can bridge that gap, but there's still a lot of people, I see it all the time, where they feel like the LDS Church and BYU ruined their lives.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Like, you've ruined my life.
When it came out it was last year, the year before, when the Honor Code office was under fire because a lot of people contributed to a website that said, this is my experience dealing with the Honor Code office. And some of that stuff was abhorrent. It was terrible the way they were treating people, right? BYU had to react to that. And I think they've reacted positively and tried to make some changes. It may not happen in our lifetime, but at least they're aware. They're showing they're aware of it, and they're making some strides to try to bridge some gaps like you were talking about. It's still a long way off, no question about it. But I think they've made some inroads. They've helped themselves, and they've helped others perceive them a little bit differently. It's not universal, but it's a start. It's a way to get through to some people to make them realize we are trying to understand you a little more than we were previously. We're making the effort.
Yeah. Like I said, you're dealing with not only hundreds of years of public perception and history, but you're also dealing, most recently within the LGBTQ community. You're talking about a few decades. The last, 50 or so, 60 years, 70 years of, from the pulpit, from your leadership, discussing how they feel and how they view homosexuality, same-sex attraction. And it's changed. The rhetoric has changed from then till now significantly.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but and I don't know if those are the true barriers of entry. Cecil O. Samuelson in 2011 said, no Sunday play. That's what he explained. And he talks about other values too, but he specifically brought up no Sunday play, which begs the question, with all of this conference realignment, will it become AAA for the NFL and you're a club sport like BYU rugby? You become a club sport and then it's all private funds that you get into school, and they can help you get into school, but it's all private funds that are ultimately raised by donors and your own little private entity that's associated with the school. And football's separate from NCAA affiliation because it's so unique. And maybe basketball becomes that as well. Like, that's what I see. I don't see conferences as much as I see those that have a sustainable business model winning out. Like, because the Texases and Oklahomas and the Alabamas and the Georgias don't want to share money anymore. They don't. You either have a sustainable business model or you don't. BYU has a sustainable business model. They do. Does USC, do you think USC's happy in the Pac-12? No. I think Utah has a more sustainable business model than Cal and U of A. U of A, I think being so powerful within the basketball world, I think ASU, I don't know. I need to look at their P&L. I have to look at their U.S. Department of Education numbers. But, like, those that do not have a sustainable business model will be left in the dust, in my opinion. So I have talked pretty ardently in Atomy about, I call it collegiate communism, for lack of a better term, where you're sharing the wealth, right? And the rich sustain the poor and fiscally irresponsible, maybe even, you could say, the fiscally irresponsible. This move from Texas and Oklahoma, to me, proclaims that they will no longer allow other universities that do not add as much value as they do to suck from the teat. I got nipples, Fokker. Can you milk me? I mean, really. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's saying. Like, no longer will you get my – will you benefit from me, even though from a football standpoint, from a wins and loss standpoint, I mean, Texas is underachieved. They have
57% over the last 10 years win percentage.
But it doesn't matter. It's about, they're sustaining through their financial means and their pull. They feel like they sustain the success of those other programs financially. So they're not benefiting from it, right? In fact, they're like all these other universities in the Big 12 are benefiting off of Texas's pull. So they've seen an increase by, TCU going from the Mountain West to the Big 12 financially. We're talking about a 300% increase possibly in athletic department revenue. What does that do for them? Well, all of a sudden they probably weren't as competitive versus Texas, right? Well, now you can go out and maybe recruit against Texas. Now you can develop your talent a little bit better. And Texas over here like, well, dang, like, yeah, maybe there's a reason why we're not back. You know?
We need more money. Then we'll be back.
Well, no, but I'm not saying you need more money necessarily. They have plenty of money, but what they've done is they've allowed for other universities that have had a competitive disadvantage from a monetary standpoint to get back up to this status where they can, from a financial standpoint, they're not Texas, but they're definitely a lot healthier, and they can invest more so in their programs. So they've seen significant growth in productivity and development, whereas Texas is still trying to figure it out because I think their culture is jacked up, just like USC's culture is jacked up. USC and Texas are one and the same, in my opinion. It's Hollywood culture, you know? There's too many cooks in the kitchen determining who's hired, who's fired, how we coach, who we coach, right? There's a lot of Hollywood and prestige, and it's not a Alabama meritocracy, Nick Saban run type of program. It's not. You want Clay Helton rather than Ed Orgeron at USC, right? Right? You got rid of Ed O. And he's a good coach, national champion at LSU. Why? Because he didn't fit the culture, didn't fit Hollywood. Texas, how many bad hires have they made?
Yeah, 4 coaches in the last
Hollywood
10
hires.
years.
I call them Hollywood hires.
Yeah.
They're Hollywood hires. They're PR hires, not culture-driven hires. Am I wrong? Look at all of them. It's all about pleasing Hollywood. It's about pleasing those that, from a PR standpoint, get excited about those things.
Does Steve Sarkisian fit the culture at Texas?
Sark has had this up and down trajectory. At Washington, was he that good of a coach? He had success, but did he deserve the USC job? He was an offensive mind. He's pretty sexy. And then he picks up the USC job. Why? Donors wanted him. PR wanted him. The media wanted him. That's who wanted him. Is he a creator, an architect of overachieving and maximizing the talent of culture? I don't know. Utah is. College football, Pick Six previews earlier today put out the overachieving programs with the talent that they have. I thought this was interesting. Utah is number 3. This is per Pick Six previews. BYU's number 7. The talent that they bring in, that they recruit, how do they develop them? That correlates to wins and also NFL placement. BYU, Utah. It's culture. So much of what determines wins and losses is culture. Period. In my opinion. I think there's enough data to support that. The culture of a corporate entity, a culture of a football team, a culture of society, right? What's going to determine success, long-term success? I brought this up before. I'm pontificating now, but I love a book called The Triple Package, and it's about making money in the United States of America. Look it up. Triple Package, Ivy League scholars. It's a husband-wife duo, and it looks at subgroups of the United States of America, ethnicities, races, and then it breaks down commonalities, how 3 unlikely traits explain the rise and fall of culture groups in America. It's a fantastic read. And some people have said it's racist. I'm like, well, I don't know how, because it's promoting Nigerians, it's promoting Asians subgroups, right? it's really interesting. So read through it, tell me your thoughts. But, that's what determines success. It's really interesting. The 3 traits are these. Let me tell you the 3 traits because I think this is so intriguing. Superiority complex. By definition, superiority is a deeply internalized belief in your group's specialness, exceptionality, or superiority, right? So you believe that you are chosen. Number 2, insecurity. The authors define insecurity as a species of discontent and anxious uncertainty about. These are the 3 common themes amongst all of these subgroups in the United States of America, right? These cultural traits within all of them. And you can look through all of the different the groups that were studied in this. Quite interesting. So, insecurity. And then the other one is impulse control. The final and probably the most important. Do you have impulse control? Impulse control. Hollywood is not impulse control. It's not, man. It's not. Texas right now ain't impulse control. Maybe with Sark, maybe in the second go-around. I don't know. We'll see. I'm intrigued. We'll go to break. What's cooking with the Cougars? Coming up next here on the Cougar Sports Insider Radio Network, 94.5 FM and ESPN 960.
The rich and powerful want us to think the economy is a line on a stock market ticker. That's wrong. The economy is powered by us. It's what we create, what we buy, what we need. President Biden has proposed bold public investments in jobs and families, but more is needed. We need housing, healthcare, caregiving, action on the climate crisis, and millions of good-paying jobs. This is our moment to finally unlock prosperity for all of us. For more information, go to prosperus.org. That's prosperus.org.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.